Welcome everyone to Birching the West, where we talk about everything related to birching, educational activism with the John Birch Society. Today we have a very special guest with us. His name is Craig Schmidt. Craig is a former military. He's, of course, member with the John Birch Society, and I believe involved in the ministry. So Craig is a kind of a multifaceted fellow, and it's great to have you on today, Craig. Welcome to Birching the West.
Thank you, Alden. I appreciate it. It's good to see everybody here.
Yes, sir. It's great to have you on. So, Craig, I guess we should start a little bit about maybe tell us about yourself. What's something that
Sure.
you'd like the listeners, the viewers, to know about you that would be?
Sure. Everybody hates these kind of things when they start out with your childhood, but I'm gonna dig back a few years here and dredge up a few memories because I think it's very important, especially for JBS members, and those wannabe members as well, because there's a foundation that we all begin at. And it's very crucial, I think, at many times that we understand those foundations so that we can build off of them and be aware of them so that we can recognize points of agreement and points of training and learning. So anyway, my name is Craig Schmidt, and I'm originally from the south suburbs of Chicago. Grew up just outside the city limits, and back in the day when we used to recite the Pledge of Allegiance all the time, there's a great sense of patriotism. It was great for family members to have service careers like fire department, police. I don't have any police in my background, but we have some fire department relatives, and hearing about their sacrifices growing up and seeing the sacrifices made made a lasting impression on me. There was a strong sense of nationalism, I guess, in my family, and also in the town I grew up in back in the '60s. And that's a great foundation to be basing life off of, for sure. I don't know if you guys all had the same kind of days back then. The big highlight for us was 4th of July parades, where we could listen to 8 or 10 or 12 different towns of fire departments come and drive down the street with their sirens blaring and flags waving and candy being thrown all over the place. I mean, that was just some great times that I look back on now and say, I really wish we had those days back. Also, during those times, we were taught much about the red communists and how they were looking to take over the whole world, and if we didn't stay patriotic and vigilant, we'd be overthrown by the Reds, by the commies, by the communists, and that's all I really knew about it at the time was, Soviet Union was bad, Americans were good. And then of course we got into the Vietnam era and stuff, and a lot of the projects we did in grade school and early high school and that were based on the war, which really wasn't a war, but we called it that. I had family members that went and had neighborhood friends that went to the war, and I was just a few years off from being able to go myself, about 3 or 4 years too late. But I remember those days. I remember being very patriotic, and I also remember seeing all the protests going on. Growing up in Chicago, there was an awful lot of protesting going on back in the 60s and early 70s, up to the mid 70s. And I always stood opposed to those protests because I couldn't understand why people would speak against our great nation. I was a flag waver from years back, and didn't quite understand all that. When I got into high school, I remember distinctly taking a United States class, basically on the United States government, and it was exciting. I remember some great things happening in class, but I don't remember anything really coming out of it. It was another box to check, basically, but there wasn't any sense of duty to do anything. Wave a flag on the 4th of July and say the pledge and things like that. That was the extent. I didn't know anything any more than that, other than being a good service-minded and other-centered person. But after I got out of high school, I got tied in with a group of guys that loved to drag race, and I was a mechanic and went to school for that, and was, boy, just excited about making that the rest of my life, going out to the drag strip and drinking beers and, you know, having fun and all that. And after races, we go and sit in the bar and, you know, talk about the day and play games and watch the news. And unfortunately, at that time, the news was nothing but filled with the capture of the American citizens by Iran. And that went on and on and on. And I could never understand, why didn't we go and get those guys? Why didn't we try to save them? Why didn't we do something more than sitting back and trying to be diplomatic about things? And it got me angry enough that after so many nights of hearing this over and over again, I got upset, and I made a decision based on that anger that led me right into the United States Air Force. I thought, I'm going to go and do something about this travesty, and I'm going to make sure that that Iran pays for their kidnapping and their disrespecting of our country. And so I joined the Air Force in March 1980, and got into. I started out my career there as a in-flight or in air refueling tanker crew chief. There were KC-135 aircraft, a 707 airframe. They were what we considered the big birds, not as big as the B-52s that sat across the ramp from us, but they were big, and that's what I wanted to work on. You know, hey, I was a mechanic working on cars. What could be better than working on airplanes? You know, the bigger the better. And so I spent 4 years doing that before I retrained. And just as I was retraining, I became reacquainted with a girl woman that lived across the hall from me in the dorm. She was in our squadron. She worked on the heavies. She worked on the B-52s. And it's just surprising that she was probably the first face that I saw in our dorm in 1980 when I got to Mayfair Air Force Base in Sacramento. And then just as I was leaving, she was probably one of the last faces I saw. And the fortunate thing about that last encounter was about 2.5 months later, we got married. And I was retraining into F-16 avionics, went to Lowry Air Force Base in Denver, Colorado. And while I was there, proposed to her over Christmas, and we got married in January of 1984. And we spent our first 9 months apart, coast to coast. I ended up going to Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. She was still at Mayfair in Sacramento. And we continued with our burgeoning married life, our new married life, spending that time apart. Eventually, because of her injuries, she was able to retrain into photography and join me out in South Carolina. And I began my avionics career. I worked on F-16 aircraft, which at the time were the hottest, the best fighter aircraft in our inventory. It was just before the stealth fighters came out, which I almost went to work on here in the desert of people call Area 51, Tonopah. But anyway, we after we got together, we ended up going to Germany for 3 years, and we spent time over there setting up an avionics shop and enjoying the country. And lo and behold, they rotated me back from Germany back to the States, to Lowry Air Force Base, to be a technical training instructor. And I did everything I could to get out of that assignment. I couldn't turn it down. I tried to apply for an officer candidate school in the Navy. They turned me down. I tried to put in for another assignment stateside. They turned me down for that. And they said, no, we need you there. My biggest fear was talking in front of people. Just like many of us who end up overcoming it. I was thrown into the fire and came out on the good side and became a technical training instructor, teaching the job that I had been in for 6 years at that point, 7 years. And I grew to love it. I really grew to love seeing the light bulbs kick on in people's minds about our career and fixing equipment and running programs and doing what we call pinouts, doing checks, electronic checks and electrical checks from wire to wire. It was just it was cutting edge, state of the art, and the biggest wow factor that I could find. And I just loved every minute of it. But in '92, the Air Force had what they call the RIF going on, a reduction in force. And I got caught up in that and ended up getting out in 1992 and stayed there in the Denver area for a number of years. But all that time I spent in the Air Force, my first job took me all over the world. I went to Australia and Japan and Korea and even made it to Wake Island. And I know some of you probably remember that island. That was a big refueling point in World War II. Made it to that little horseshoe in the middle of the Pacific, and it's got some great pictures of that. But after I got out of the service, kind of wandered a little aimlessly for a short time, but got involved with church, and eventually, through a series of events, ended up becoming a pastor. And I was raised Methodist, and we ended up in a Southern Baptist church, which I had never heard of before, but we had good friends that went there, and so I gave my life over to the ministry for nearly 20 years, just right around 20 years, I guess, and I was able to pastor 4 churches across 3 states, and I have to say, at the end of all that, I kind of consider myself retired from the ministry. I still do some teaching periodically. I have to say, at the end of all that, it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. Very trying and taxing, times of great joy, times of just deep sorrows, immense suffering. My family's been through a lot through the ministry, as other families have been, but God sustained us all through it. And I just love studying the Bible. I love studying the Word and getting into that and helping people understand it. It's still a part of my life and part of my heritage, if you will. And now, through all of those various things, I find myself being a teacher once again, not in the church, but outside the church, teaching the Constitution and teaching about government and law and now all things Birch. So we moved back here, Vegas. We had been in California for a few years, from 2014 to 2017, basically. We moved back here in 2018, and I got tied up with some people here, and we started doing getting settled here, and it was very funny that one day we bought our first house while we were here just a year and a half ago. With all the moving around, with the ministry and that, I always thought that it would be a bad idea for us to buy a house, because I thought, well, if God decided to move us somewhere, then we'd have more troubles on our hands. So we were the missionaries, the nomads, if you will, for many years, and we finally settled in here and bought a house, and just sitting around the living room one day studying some Constitution stuff, and I get a knock on the door, and not expecting anybody at all. And I went to the door, and there's an odd gentleman standing there that basically said, "You don't know me, but I'm from the John Birch Society." And he said, "I got your name off of the website, off our information, because apparently you got a free membership, or you joined the website, and we've been sending you emails and that. And I wanted to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Bliss too." And didn't know him from Adam. Very sincere. Looking at him, I was just, this guy has something that he wants to say, because for somebody to come and do that, to come to a complete stranger's door in a completely strange town they hadn't been to. I mean, I know he had been to Vegas before, but he hadn't been to my house, and to introduce himself and say that he was from the Birch Society. I invited him in, and we sat and talked, and he spent about a half an hour laying things out for me and telling me that they had a meeting that night or the next night. I don't remember exactly, but long and short of it is we went to a meeting and got to meet our chapter president and his wife, Willie and Denise Shazier. and some great people. There were others there at the meeting that we wanted to connect with as well. They were some good, solid people. And we began our journey with the John Birch Society in late 2019. It was quite the experience, I have to say. I had never heard about John Birch Society before growing up. And I guess that's probably the way things were in my neck of the woods. So didn't talk a lot about politics per se and the conspiratorial aspects of certain industries and certain people and groups. So I didn't have any preconceived notions of the John Birch Society. But all I knew was this: when I got on their website and I started looking at the information that was there and started hunting and pecking around the website, every time I turned around, every page I clicked on, I was like, I agree with that. I agree with that. Wow, that's some great stuff there. Man, I need to print that out. And it just became a cascading effect of downloading information, printing it out, and trying to imbibe it as much as possible. It was about 6 or 8 months before Bliss showed up after I had initially joined on the website and started receiving the emails and that. So I kind of didn't know what to do. Didn't know where to begin, and I hadn't really fully retired at that point. But I knew that what I saw and what I heard was top-notch information. Nope, I hadn't heard any of the conspiracy theories. Hadn't heard anything about 1958. Hadn't heard anything about the early '60s, mid '60s, and all the garbage that got slung around. The untruths that were told about the society, but I was open and still open and ready to get down to some business here. So that's kind of the nutshell of my existence, I guess, with of course some details left out, but that's what brought me to where we're at today.
Well, that's quite a story, Craig. I think it sounds like you've had sometimes day to day, I suppose all of us, we feel like our lives are maybe not as exciting as others, but it sounds like you've had some, some exciting times in your life and some things that really have been, difficult. Some things have been joyous, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know anybody. I think that's why Willie and I, chapter president Willie Shazier and I got hit it off so well. Willie being a 29-year Navy vet, retired.
Yeah.
We had an awful lot in common and still do, and growing to love him more and more day by day, and just appreciate him a lot. Yeah, anybody that's been in the military, we've got some stories that we could tell. Some good, some bad. But
yeah,
I survived getting having an engine blow up on me. Survived falling off wings. And survived some near froze to death in Alaska and a lot of different things. But the Lord's brought me through all that stuff for a purpose, for a reason, and now I know what the reason is today. Another chapter in my life was kind of semi-closed off. I still preach periodically, still enjoy that, and I still enjoy all the studying that I've done through the years, and still will continue that for sure. But now I have a different message to be bringing to people, and it's been a great thing to study our founders and their religious heritage and the things that they thought about, and hearing about pastors firing the first shot and things like that, and realizing after so many years that there's more to our existence than just studying. There's a call for action. We call for it in the church all the time, right? Come to church, study your Bible, come to meetings, all this kind of stuff. And we as Birchers, we have a call to action too. And that's the great thing about the bulletin, about having the online resources to be able to send video messages and tape messages and recorded messages and emails and stuff directly to people with the press of a couple buttons. I get such a kick out of that.
It's so nice to have that right at your fingertips. Yeah, Craig, every once in a while, I think all of us, we're talking with people that are I guess, throw them in the category of believers, whatever that might mean, right?
Mhm.
And they say, well, uh, we're just supposed to pray and read our scriptures, and God will take care of the rest. He doesn't really hold us accountable for being involved in um, what people call politics. Um, how why would you say that's maybe not quite accurate? That that it is important
Well,
for believers to be involved in such things.
Well, the I mean, James is probably one of the biggest ones that we read about and say it's not enough to just pray. We have to do things, we are doers of the word, not just hearers only. And if that's all we do is hear, well, we're stunting the growth really of the church, of God's family, of the kingdom, and we're not allowing, especially those who are apart from God, to be able to see what it means to be a follower. We've been called. Israel was a nation. They were God's people. They were His chosen ones, we're told, and they certainly didn't sit back and just not do anything. They carried swords. I mean, go flash forward to the New Testament, the Old Testament era in the New Testament and the Gospels, and we see Peter wielding a sword and cutting off an ear. Jesus saying, "Hey, it's not time for that yet," and he healed the ear right there on the spot. But they protected themselves. They did the things that they needed to do. And when we're told, render to Caesar what's Caesar's and render to God what's his, well, that includes, standing up and being the free people. Now I'm understanding much greater, much better, this whole idea of natural rights, why our declaration says that we're governed by the laws of nature and nature's God, and that these rights are God-given, that they're throughout both testaments. They're seen everywhere, and every society has been built off of God's laws. In one form or another. You can call them commandments, you call them whatever you want, but they're basically the laws of God. That says, it's not good to kill people. It's not good to covet other people's things. It's good to be satisfied with the things you have. But like I say, there's so many examples that I've come to see now that I used to speak against, if you will, through sermons. It's all about prayer. It's firing the winning shot, and that's what's going to get us there. There's truth in that, but that's part of the truth. Once we understand the truth, then it's incumbent upon us to act on that truth. And that's, I think, what stymies a lot of church growth today. Is there's a lot of great people sitting around talking about great things and being good to each other and wholesome and caring and loving and all that. But that can go away very easily if we don't tend to the business at hand, which is making sure that our country stays a God-driven, God-believing, Bible-believing country. Our founders came over with a purpose, and that was to have religious freedom, to be able to study and learn and teach and about God and act that way. I'm dismayed that we've lost so much of that, but we have some clear courses on how to get that back.
Yeah, that's very good news. Every once in a while, I guess I hear people say, well, John Birch Society is something that maybe helps my my religious beliefs, help me put that in action, help to be more meaningful. I don't know if you'd put it in those terms, but is that something that maybe is kind of accurate for yourself? Or
Well, it is, because for so many years in the ministry, I forsook anything government. God is good, government is bad. And the two should never meet together. And unfortunately, I was under that for a long time. And as I saw churches declining in our country, many churches are declining right now and have for many years. And I think part of the elements of that decline are the fact that we've depended upon other people to do the work, but not ourselves. In other words, we've gotten comfortable with our 2 cars in the driveway, or 3 now, you know, our 2-story house with the pool in the back, and, you know, come home from work and just relax because I work so hard during the day. And, you know, and that's become our existence, you know. And when you talk about, you know, going out and going to a rally, and voicing your opinion, or going and talking to your legislative representatives, it's like, no, you know, I've got better things to do. I've got, the grass needs to be cut, and, you know, I haven't had a day off in so long, so I'm just going to go out to the lake and relax. And
priority 7, whatever, is the only way you can get without having it signed for.
Okay.
The only way, he says, to put a regular envelope and do it certified. He said, but then you have to sign for it. So I said no. So, but it's cheaper than going there. I mean,
No, I know it is. I'm not bitching about that, except
can you hear me? It looks like I got, like, something jumped on mute here for me. Let's see here.
I can hear you
Oh.
okay.
I can hear sound now. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. Yeah, I can hear you now, Eldon. Yeah, it looks like I lost my sound or something happened. That was weird. Gotta love electronics.
Eldon, I think your mic is muted.
Okay.
Now I can hear you.
Oh, now you can hear me. Well, I said something really brilliant, and you just all missed it, I guess, right?
Oh man,
Right.
isn't that the way it is?
No, I was just making the point that some churches nowadays are shut down, right, by their state or whatever. How might that be different if the
Oh,
members of the congregation were more involved, if they were
well,
aware of just their
that's-
basic rights?
yeah, and that's probably the one thing that has dismayed me more than anything else. I know if I was still pastoring a church, we would not close the doors. I wouldn't allow that to happen. And in the state of many churches today, I would probably be asked to leave, and so that they could, you know, move on and do the things they wanted to do, and that's okay. I mean, I get that, but I'm very, very much and so adamant about, you know, our First Amendment, and leading the charge to all the other amendments too. Of, you know, you will not shut my voice off. You know, God gave me a voice to speak His truth, and His truth is wrapped in an American flag. Really, you know, that's how our founders did it. They wrapped God's truths in the American flag and said, "We want to honor you in all that we do." Just like the churches today, we want to honor you in all that we do, God. And if we don't, if we're willing to give that up for a face diaper, as I call them. I'm sorry if that's offensive. I don't mean it to be to you, but it's a stark contrast. You know, if we're willing to give that up, then really not only is our patriotism, our love of our country very shallow, but so is our love of God very shallow. And they say I was never one in all my ministry to pull punches. And I spoke the truth, and I hid behind God's truth, you know, said, if you have a problem, take it up with Him. You know, I'm just reiterating what He said. I felt that's pretty sure ground to stand on. So, yeah, very disappointed, but I'm, you know, I look at people like John MacArthur in LA. I've seen him. He was out to my seminary. I forgot to share this with you guys. I actually have a master's of divinity from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, which is the flagship for the Southern Baptist world. And I met John MacArthur there a number of times and listened to him preach and sat and talked with him a number of times and met a lot of great people. And it's great to see people like him standing up and saying, no, you can do what you want, but you're not going to come in here. You have no government, you have no voice in our church. It ends at the door. So you guys can stay out there. And when we come out, you can speak with us, but we're going to do our thing. God commanded us to not forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is. So that's what we're going to follow. And we should. And that's what I'm trying to get across to people here.
Yeah, definitely a good point to make. Many people are struggling, I think, with that and of course, a number of other things, right?
Right.
Maybe we're a little over half an hour in, or right about that, right? Craig, should we take some questions from others
Sure.
here? Do you want to do that?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
Anybody that wants to unmute themselves and ask your question, then, once you're done, want to hit mute again.
Uh-oh, I lost your sound again.
Not all at once, huh?
Oh, there we go.
So we get somebody that might have a question. If not, that's fine,
Yeah.
I guess. But
Well, yeah, and it's okay if they don't too. I mean, there's a lot to think about for sure.
yeah, it's a
Greg, this is Dale. What positions did you hold in the John Birch Society?
I haven't held any positions. I'm just a run-of-the-mill member.
That's good. That's what we need more of.
Exactly. And Dale, I find myself now speaking very openly about becoming members, about getting in touch with us, checking us out, because I think people lack an avenue right now for their anger, for their lack of participation in the past. They don't know what to do. They want to do something, but they don't know what to do. And this is one of the greatest avenues I've ever seen to be able to start somebody from day one, say, here's a page you can get to. Everybody knows how to get there. Click, click, click. Here you are to our page. And you can send an email to your representatives. And when you hit that send button, you're going to feel really good inside, that you've actually done something. And then your participation can take many more roles after that, and that's what I'm looking to do as well, is get more involved and more active and actually going out and meeting the representatives and that. And if you want to look at it this way, kind of getting in people's faces and saying, you know what, I'm Craig and I'm part of We the People here, and I'm from the Birch Society, and we have some things we need to talk about. I need to share with you for your good and for our good.
So, Craig, did any of your congregation oppose you being in the John Birch Society?
Well, Dale, I don't have a congregation right now. I'm, if you will, kind of semi-retired. I'll go and preach when churches ask me to, but I don't have a flock that I look after week by week now. But I can tell you right now that the answer from previous churches to that question, I'm sure, would be no. They wouldn't have a problem with it.
Oh, good.
So just kind of follow up on that, Craig. Would you say something like the bulletin, the member bulletin that people get, or maybe the tangents booklet or the agenda booklet,
Here's
are those helpful in helping people have direction so they don't go off on something and say, okay, let's go take our guns and
right,
do whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the last thing that anybody wants to see is Americans shooting Americans. The unfortunate thing is that I think in our society today, many former Americans are former because they're now socialists. And socialism has no place in our government. And the sooner that we bring that message to those people and help them to understand it, I think the better off we're going to be as a country. But yeah, we certainly don't want to start with, guns blazing, because that's not the answer. And our founders told us, up front that they did every single thing they could possibly do before they pulled a weapon out and started firing, and I think that's good advice.
Yeah, I think so too. We don't glory in bloodshed.
Right, and the tools that you're talking about, for sure, they're great tools to be able to help people feel that sense of belonging and that sense of activity that they've been lacking.
Yes, sir. All right, other questions? We have a burning question for Craig. Feel free to unmute yourself. Fire away.
This is Ken Bauer. I just got in here. We just barely got home, and so I'm in a little late, so I don't know what's been said. I just got on that thing that there shouldn't be any gunfight, which I agree with, because it's easy to start a gunfight, but once you get it going, you can't stop it. So I don't.
Right.
I don't think that's the way to go. It may have to be at some time that we'll have to do that, but I don't think the time is right yet.
No, Ken, I believe that too. I don't think we're at that point. I think, I will say this, I think we need to be mentally ready to be at that point without going there. And my thoughts really on it is I would rather be mentally prepared and not do that than to jump right into that and regret every moment,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that last bulletin that we got, the one for January, that was an excellent bulletin. I thought that it gave us a ways that without any bloodshed, that we can actually take this back if we can get enough people involved. And we're really going to make a push down here in Cedar City to start recruiting more members. We've already got some new members joining our Constitution Party.
Good.
They're fed up with the Democrats and the Republicans, and the way they've all abandoned Trump and abandoned the country. So they're looking for another ship to jump onto now. So I'm gonna try and bring them right into Bird Society to show that, hey, we've got more than one resource to do. And I wished I had an old video that we'd seen at one time when we lived in Sparks, but it was one about Ezra Taft Benson, and this is when he was Secretary of Agriculture that he made this. It was way back. It's an old one, but he said that every one of us should be a member of the John Birch Society.
Oh yeah, that's on YouTube.
Oh, really?
I think I know what Stand Tall for Freedom is. I think it's called.
Oh, and that is on YouTube now?
Yeah,
Oh,
you can find it
cool.
on YouTube. So yeah, Ezra
Unless
Taft
they took
Benson's
it
still
down
recruiting
already.
from the grave.
It's what?
He's still recruiting from the grave
Yes, good.
for the John Birch Society.
But that doesn't allow them to vote.
I
Right.
like what was said-
Yeah, he can't. Hopefully, he's not voting, right?
I like what was said about being mentally prepared. I know I went to an OBGYN doctor years ago, and he suggested I have some surgery. And I said, I'm not ready. I came back 2 years later, and he said, well, you're mentally prepared now, so you'll heal up well. So if we're mentally prepared, we'll be in a better attitude every which way to go to battle if we have to.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that people say that wars are won and lost in the mind. And that's there's truth to that.
Yeah, very well put. Okay. Anyone else with a question? Might be. Don't feel shy. If not, that's okay.
Where I don't know if I know Craig. Where are you from?
I'm a member of the Las Vegas chapter.
Oh, you're from Vegas. Oh,
Yes.
we're just a little bit north of you here in Cedar City then.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in Cedar City. Beautiful town.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you all, especially Craig, of course. Thank you for
Yes,
being
well,
on.
thank you too for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's really good to have you on, Craig, and just discussing, things of your life, things that have made a difference for you. Of course, tying in the JBS and how that's been part of your life as well. And certainly good to know. Certainly good to have you as a
Thank you.
member and as a new member, really fairly new.
Yeah, I consider myself a newbie.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of time, really, because the John Birch Society is so, I guess, a lot of history, a lot of things to learn. It's
Many
different
facets on that
yeah,
stone.
many facets on all different issues and leadership and organizing and all these things that you can learn, right? But we just all take it one day at a time and try to focus on what we can do. And it's amazing what one person can do or a few people can do with the right direction.
Yes,
So,
amen to that.
yeah.
Looks like Bonnie has a question there.
Oh, okay. Oh, I don't want to cut off Bonnie.
No, my question is in reference to the letter that the John Birch Society sent in response to January 6th. And is the first thing we need to do get a hold of our legislators to ask them to revise the voting process?
Yeah, there will be more direction on that or I guess you might say some tools from headquarters, but part of it would be really figuring out what the situation is in your state. So you're in Utah. For example, does Utah have same day registration and same day voting? Or do they have universal mail-in ballot? What's going on in Utah that needs to be changed, or what's going well that helps for election integrity? We want to keep those things, right?
Right.
But yeah,
Okay.
a lot of it's state level. There's a few things that'll come out that's federal level that the federal government has done. Congress has passed some laws that aren't so good either, but a lot of it's state level.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet, Bonnie.
I've got another question, I guess. If the feds pass some stuff, we still have nullification at our disposal if we can get our state legislatures to go along with it, and our county commissioners and our city councils, don't we?
Okay. I'm sorry. I just had a little. Can you repeat that again, Ken? I'm sorry to have you.
Boy, I hope I can. It was off the cuff there. I say, even though the feds passed some unconstitutional laws on us, we've still got nullification at our disposal, don't we? With our state legislatures, with our county commissions and our city councils. Can't we nullify a lot of this bad stuff that they're doing and just not participate in it?
Yeah, we can. There are certain things that we can nullify. It's a kind of a case-by-case basis as to how effective nullification to be and on certain things that maybe the federal government is doing. But yeah, it's that's a very powerful tool that can be used. Hopefully that answers your question.
It did. All we're gonna have to do is try it and see, like you say, case by case, to see how effective it is on each case. But the more we do it, the more power we'll get in that nullification till we've, I think, maybe got our country back.
A lot of it really is educating people as to what nullification is, what it is not, how it can be used effectively. A lot of people just have just really don't have an idea of what that entails and what would be involved. One good book is the Doctrine of Lesser Magistrates. It's available on shopjbs.org, kind of goes into that. So that can be good at help educate ourselves, and also say your local county official or local city council or local state legislator, what have you.
What was the name of that book again?
It's called The Doctrine of Lesser Magistrates.
Okay, we got that.
Yep.
It's not a big book like Tragedy and Hope, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Not real big.
Because I did get that one and read it from cover to cover, but
Well, you're very ambitious to do that, but it's a good thing you read it. Yeah.
yeah.
I have a comment.
Sure.
I've been involved in the past with Nevada Families Eagle Forum. I've been to a couple of Eagle Forum national conventions. They're highly pro-Constitution. We have not been involved in the Utah Eagle Forum, but that was a thought that came to me as you gentlemen were talking, that maybe if I get a little more involved in Eagle Forum, we can get to the point where I can encourage them to look into the John Birch Society.
Well, there's certainly some overlap in what the Eagle Forum pushes and what the John Birch Society does as well. Obviously each group is a little bit different, but yeah, actually I had a booth literature table just the other day at the Eagle Forum convention in Utah, and met lots of very friendly people. They're it's a good group to reach out to. A lot of like-minded people.
Thank you.
I think that's a lot of our problem. There's a lot of us that are like-minded. We've got to all come together, whether it be joining each other's organization or whatever, and participate in the meetings and start participating in all the functions that all of us have. The government, their favorite patriot is lone wolf. It's easy to take him down, but where we're in organized groups, it's going to be a little tougher for him, I believe.
Yeah, well, many of our members, of course, are various groups and things, and so it's just kind of a case-by-case basis what people want to be involved in. We certainly encourage our members to be involved politically. We're not going to tell them what party or what candidate to support or anything, but that's certainly a good thing as well.
But it does buy into that whole idea too, that there's power in numbers. And the more numbers that we can amass, the more and quicker effect we're going to have on our legislatures. It's like the last gentleman was just saying, that one person, a lone wolf, doesn't scare them. What does scare them is, 5,000 people standing up and saying, we're not tolerating that anymore. And we're nullifying that. We're not going to treat that as law. And if we have problems with you on that, we're going to mass ourselves and we're going to come and tell you you're not going to have a problem with that anymore.
Yeah, numbers do help. You'd be surprised at how, in a way, how few numbers it takes. Like for a congressman, if they get 50 phone calls in a relatively short amount of time on an issue, they really take notice. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, thousands, but thousands is fine too.
I had a question for
Eldon,
you.
somebody told, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, with the amount of socialists that we have now in government, how effective do you feel that's going to be? Are we going to lose some ground to, like 50 people making phone calls? Is that going to be less effective, you think, with the belligerents?
Well, it's interesting how responsive, especially the U.S. House members are. They get elected every 2 years, so they have to pay attention if they want to go back. I mean, they're basically, they end up a campaign and they're not long before they're campaigning again for the next 2 years if they want to be back in. So they really have to be.
Okay.
The thing with we know there's you might say an unhealthy number of socialists in the Congress, in the House especially, but also in the Senate. If they get enough pressure, they can either change tune, or what happens is you start seeing people that are politically inclined, and they're aware of a movement is happening, and that means that there's volunteers, people that can support their campaign to help them be successful campaigning. So,
Mhm.
a lot of times that'll happen too, where there's a challenge when they start to see enough people organized, enough people involved. Very common.
Thanks. Thank you.
You
I
bet.
was gonna mention, Eldon, that I knew a man in the Washington State Legislature helped a man get elected. But according to him, every phone call they received, they multiplied it by 50. So amazing how just 10 phone calls can have an effect on legislatures.
Mm-hmm. That represents 500 voters in their mind,
Both, yeah.
roughly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get
Yeah,
50 phone calls, you're talking about what, 2,500? Which is a
Exactly.
pretty significant movement if you're a representative of, say, 900,000 people. And probably 200,000 of those decide if you're going to go back to office in a general election. So
Yeah, exactly.
the math adds up pretty quick.
When we lived in Nevada, we was up at Carson City one time and at the legislature, and I just talked to a legislator, and they had a bill that looked like it was going to pass, and a bunch of us showed up, and they turned it down. And I made the comment to this legislator. I said, "Man, I'm surprised they turned this down, because they was overwhelmingly supporting this until a handful of people showed up." And she says, "Well, do you know how we count this stuff?" And I says, "No." And she said about the same thing about a phone call. Anybody can make a phone call, and it usually goes into the main switchboard there at DC. If you call in Washington, it's different there in the state though. But she said it was they thought that for everybody that made a phone call, it was 50. Because anybody can do that, and everybody's got their phones with them. If they get an email, they'll multiply that, where they got to go to their computer and type out the email and stuff. They multiply that by 100. And if you show up, they multiply that by 1,000, because they think there's 1,000 people that feel like this person did, but they couldn't get here to this meeting, but this person showed up. So that's how they multiply that stuff out. So it really makes a difference. And the one thing that I've always thought is that if you call that 202 number back there in Washington, D.C., anybody can do that. And then you just ask for Mitch McConnell's office, and they patch you through to them, and you tell him you don't like the way he's done this or done that. But I think what's more effective is if you get to their state office, because all of them, like when Orrin Hatch was here, he had that same 202 number back there in Washington that all the rest of them have. But I called out a few times for him, and he didn't even respond. But when we called his offices, one of his offices here, he had one here in Cedar, one in St. George, and then one in Salt Lake. When I called them, they got back to me, because they knew that I was a constituent from Utah. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known that local number. And so I think it makes a difference too if we go to call in on the phone, that we get their local number in the state. That way they know that they're one of us. And if we want to be more effective, want people from Nevada, we can just email them their phone number in Nevada, or their local number here, and have them call in. Now they don't know whether somebody's moved from Nevada to Utah, and it's a voting constituent or what. So we can kind of network with each other, and get the local numbers around it and make that even more effective. Just an idea from me.
Yeah, it's good to learn those experiences, right? And calling the local offices and things. That's another good tip. So yeah, thanks, Ken. All right. Well, we're coming right about the hour. So I don't know if there's any final questions. I a lot of times like to close things out if there's any final remarks or something inspirational you want to say or whatever it might be. Craig, any anything you want to leave us with?
No, I'll just leave you with a thank you for being here today, to listening to me and sharing some of these questions too. I appreciate it all.
Well, thank you, Craig, for being on and for being on Birching the West. I guess I should I always do this reminder or try to that some of you got the email about the designs and got quite a bit of feedback for billboard, which would say, "Save Our Republic, join the John Birch Society." And so we're moving forward with that. Still raising some funds. So if you want to help out on that end, feel free as well. But I'm taking the feedback, and hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll have that up and we'll be able to help us build awareness of the John Birch Society in that matter. And I kind of think it would be nice to have something as a yard sign size too, if we can get headquarters to do that, but we'll see on that as well. But well, thank you again.
Just one comment on that, Eldon. Remember, it was a billboard like that got me involved 55 years ago. So
oh yeah,
it worked.
That's right. Worked. Billboards do work. That's right. So hopefully, we can get one up and we'll get somebody to say, "I saw your billboard. I didn't know what the John Birch Society was, but I figured why not go to their website and figure out what they are," kind of like Craig was talking about. You did once upon a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. So the more we can.
What got me into the Birch Society was a conspiracy issue.
Oh, in '96. Yeah.
So it was it was quite a while ago, and I just had a friend in PA that I sent that magazine to, and he was watching. There's a movie or something, I guess, called Conspiracy Theory, I think.
Yep, it's in there.
Yeah, that magazine, he says it's right in there. He says,
yeah, it's right there behind Mel Gibson.
Yes, yes. Yep. But that's the one that got me involved with this. I didn't want to be a member of the John Birch Society because they were a communist organization, and his friend
right.
Give me the magazine, says, who printed that magazine that you like? And I says, I don't know. And boy, it was tattered and everything. I carried it around. I read that, almost memorized it. And when I looked there, I was shocked to see it was the John Birch Society. And there I'd followed the communists where they said it was a communist organization. And I swallowed that hook, line, and sinker. But once I realized the truth, I joined it immediately because and I've been a member ever since.
That's a pretty neat story. It's every once in a while. Yeah. Sometimes people find out that maybe what they had been led to believe wasn't quite accurate. And then they're like, maybe I ought to rethink this. Maybe. So that's a good story. Thanks, Ken.
Little background to that. I was a secretary for Janine Hansen of the Nevada Families Legal Forum. It was her brother, Dan Hansen, that ran different for different offices. And he was the main instigator for creating the Independent American Party of Nevada. And that was Dan Hansen that gave the conspiracy issue to Ken.
Okay.
He was, I don't know if you know anything about the Shovel Brigade in Nevada.
No.
Okay. There's a little town in northern Nevada named Jarbidge up there by Elko. And the federal government came in and shut it out. And they told the people they could either get in or get out, but they wasn't getting out if they got in. And if they got out, they wouldn't get back in again. Their homes were just gone. And it was a BLM officer. I can't remember her name now, but she was up in Montana, and they run her out of there, and she come down to Nevada, and started causing the same trouble down there. So he was very instrumental, him and a few other people, of starting a protest over there and opening that road up so those people could go back into their homes. And I can't remember what year it was, but they done it on the 4th of July. And the BLM said that they was going to be armed, and they was not going to let anybody do that. So everybody showed up with their guns and shovels and picks, and there was a guy up there in Montana that really got hosed down by the BLM. And he sent the first 100 shovels down, and they ended up with 3 semi-loads of shovels that people had donated to go close up that trench to open that road. And Martin Ironworks out of Reno built a great big shovel, and the handle of it was a telephone pole. And if you donated to that, you could get your name on a little plaque on the shovel. And they had tons of money to fight this with, and they had a big parade there, and everything. It was on the 4th of July, and I forget what year, but it was quite a few years ago.
Between 2000 and 2002.
Yeah, and they called back to Washington. They said, "Hey, all these people are out here with their guns and their shovels and everything, and they're opening this road. What do you want us to do?" Washington called back to those people, said, "If you don't want to get killed, let them open the road." And that town is still open today.
That worked?
Yes. And then
Wow.
and then we got involved with the Bucket Brigade up there where they took the water out of Klamath Falls, got involved with that. So numbers do work. I mean, it really does work. You get enough people behind a movement, and the government is so terrified of us. You know, the last thing they want too is a gunfight, and they're scared of that. You know,
Yeah, for
it
sure.
may be a little different to pick up the guns, but with the guns still out there, we've still got that fear on our side. And Gary Kasparov, I don't know if you know who he is. He was the world chess champion for, I think, 10 or 20 years. He had a saying that says the threat is worse than the execution. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind. If they're afraid of us and our guns, as long as we've got them, we don't have to use them. When we use them, the threat's gone. But as long as we got the threat there, it's more powerful than actually using them.
That's an interesting thought too. Yeah. It's thought-provoking. Well, yeah, we probably better wrap up here. We're a little over an hour, but thank you for all of you for your comments, and Craig for being on. And I'll go ahead and stop the recording here, but thank you so much, everyone. Glad you could be on, and we can talk a little bit after I
Eldon,
turn off the recording. But
Eldon,
yeah,
I have a closing scripture, if you wouldn't mind my sharing it.
sure.
Okay, it's from Timothy. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind.
With that,
Beautiful, buddy.
wonderful scripture to end on. And yeah, I got that on the recording. So
Thank you.
thank you so much, Bonnie, for that. And with that, we'll close out Birching the West. Tune in next time. All right, thanks.